was asked to explain more or less the way my technique works with which I have developed for working with the shadow, which I call touching the shadow. um, it's important to state also that this work has to be supplemented with real work in terms of, for instance, dreams or the psychoanalysis, where we go back to the past and, as it were, really get footage on our shadow. Because what we find in the past is what we find in dreams, and in this process of going back to the past is that we will find imagery of aspects of ourselves that have been repressed, which is very often the opposite of the side of us that is most dominant by day. Um, so we need to have a real good image of that, and also have achieved in the dreams to accept that. Often it emerges as a horrible thing, representing that something we have totally rejected in ourselves, that is where all the pain and lies. But if we do this, then we need to then we can practice the following method, which is a method of working with perception. And it's quite it is important to explain this also, that we have what we have learned at school and in psychology studies also is that, for instance, an emotion is when we say we're sad, that basically we're thinking that we had that's an emotion, but that's actually wrong, because that's basically a kind of a Newtonian view of the psyche, where we reduce things to individual cogs. But what we know is that the whole emotion is always a pair of opposites. So you would have that happiness would be just one half of the whole, and that would always be also coupled with not happy or sad. So the whole emotion is always both of a pair of opposites, you see. And that is what so basically, when we are stuck in one emotion, one side of the emotion, one half, the idea would be that we can actually look for the other side, because we're also having that, but it's because it's repressed, we would not be aware of it. But what we basically are when we're sad is out of balance. So then we can look for the other half of this pair, which is what the whole feeling is. And what I facilitate is in this technique is a way to be able to connect to that other half of the whole feeling, which aids us to, as it were, then regain balance. So for instance, if we see this, for instance, already in when we say that somebody that is very arrogant is actually deep down insecure. You see them. So basically, arrogance and insecurity forms one whole feeling. But when someone is very arrogant, meaning stuck in that pole, then the other side also manifests, is also there, but is unconscious. So then we get the whole being someone that is out of balance, being arrogant, and not realizing that the arrogance is a way to cover up the inferiority. So we can become very proactive then with the shadow, or with that opposite side of the feeling that we are not disowning, which would be, for instance, then that whenever we look at the world, we are going to be looking at it from out of one pole, or one half of the feeling. So then for instance, if I'm arrogant, I will tend to look down upon others, meaning I would perceive others as less. Now that less is the other half of being arrogant or being inflated. So then I can find the other half in terms of realizing that I will always color the surrounding in the terms opposite to the state I am in. And then I realize that what the tendency to be looking down at others at that moment will be a part of me, or a part of the whole feeling that I am disowning at that moment. So we can do that. We can do that in the moment, in real time, as a way to catch ourselves going out of balance. So if I'm also inferior, I will tend to see others as better than me, and then I will be disowning the superiority in me, that which is then prompting me to feel inferior. So this is a practice that we can do in real time, constantly. This is, for instance, also the answer to why we people would ask me, why have I been so negative for so long in my life? And then we find people that then fall into the opposite, which would be then being way to feeling inferior, which is then a kind of a way the mind compensates too much negativity. But it boils down to the fact that we color the surrounding in our perceptions in terms opposite to the state we are in. So then we can find that opposite in the way we are coloring in the world. So if I see someone being very inferior, then it's a part of me, and then the two can, as it were, collide, and then we get what I call touching the shadow, or we go into a kind of a state where we're neither up or down, which you can call the 0 point, or wholeness. You see, and then we don't put up or down, and that state is what connects us to the wave, or to the self, which is then in dreams it's represented as gold. And the gold means that there is no resistance to the energy, to conducting. It's a perfect conductor of gold. That means that there's no resistance in my feelings between one half and the other half. And that's when I connect to the real self, or the self with the capital S. And that self, it does have a ability to see reality for what it really is. And we have commented on that in the past. And of course, this doesn't mean that we see something out there as such, but then we realize that we are the spoon. The self perceives in those terms, then not failed anymore by these feelings that have been fragmented and disowned in us. So that's basically the practice, to realize that I will color it in terms of the opposite, and this always happens in terms of the interplay between inferiority and arrogance. And then we see that there's a whole lot of people that come to see me that are in the blues, and then they overvalue people, their partners, and then they fall into feeling very afraid that they will be left. And then the other side is that when we wake up being superior, then we will downplay the other and not realize that we should not take them for granted. So it would be interesting to hear if any of you listening to this the results of trying to apply this. I've been doing this for many years in my practice, and we have been having incredible results. Because, for instance, how do I know what are the results? Is that we become non-local, and I've talked about this, that we can connect in a more non-local way to others. And then I've spoken to this about in terms of forming these little tribes. So yes, so my work really is about facilitating this practice and forming these groups, which are like ascension groups, if you wish, or groups where people become back non-local. And thus what it really means is that we exit this the particle state, and we move on the wave, which is then in another video I described it as getting back our wings. So it would be interesting to hear if this explanation was enough to be able to practice and to maybe give me some real results. Comment, share some real results with this technique.